Hello, everybody. Please help me welcome the wonderful Erica Hall to the podcast today. We got this booked a couple of weeks ago, Erica, and I've been excited to speak to you. So, Erica, for those of you who don't know, is a board certified physician assistant with over 15 years of experience, specializing in organ transplant, reconstructive surgery, and emergency medicine. She's also certified mastery level integrative health practitioner, puts me to shame, and also serves as faculty teaching mastery level studies at the IHP Institute. So currently, Erica is vice president of health at Equal Life, a leading functional medicine company offering at-home testing, scientifically backed supplements, and protocols for natural balancing. And I might add, you're also you work alongside Dr. Stephen Cabral as well. Sure, someone has heard
Correct.
him.
Yes, absolutely.
How are you? Thank you for giving me some time today.
Wonderful. Chemaine, I am so excited to be here. And all of those good things that you said in your very nice introduction are correct. I practiced conventional medicine for about 15 years. And as we sort of all understand, conventional medicine tends to be a bit reductionist, right? We reduce symptoms down to systems, and that one system gets one doctor and it gets one medication. Um, and I found that unfulfilling after a lot of years. And so about 7 years ago, I turned towards integrative and functional medicine, wanting to get deeper healing for clients, understanding more of the root causes that can cause some of these imbalances, turned towards integrative and functional medicine, became certified there. Shortly thereafter, joined the team at Equal Life, and now I oversee the health operations there, working alongside Dr. Cabral and helping hundreds of thousands of clients with the same things that they go to their doctor with, the same things that they come to you with and say, can you help me? Because nobody else can.
Yeah, conventional medicine has its place. If your leg is
Absolutely.
falling off, please don't come to us. Go to a hospital. But we hear the same story over and over again. I've been to my doctor. He's told me it's normal, everything's normal. Go home. There's nothing I can do. Like people are not getting the help they need. And on a deeper level, most people know when they're walking out that doctor's office, no, he's wrong. Like there is something wrong. I know there's something wrong. Like we have that intuition.
100%. And I think that's a perfect segue into talking about some of these imbalances that happen right alongside perimenopause, because that's when most women in our practice tend to seek us out. They say, I know something's wrong. I feel it. I don't feel like myself. It's different. And you know, their other providers or they themselves may have chalked it up to, well, this is natural aging. Even in their late 30s, they may say, well, it's probably perimenopause, right? Without really understanding how imbalances can actually start. And I'd like to dig in there so that everyone understands, well, how does this get going? How do you get to the place where now you don't feel like yourself? How does this accumulation happen where now you're saying, what's wrong and how do I get to the bottom of this? But when clients come to us after they've seen a provider, and the ranges, as you know, are
Crazy.
very, very large, crazy large. What we do in functional and integrative health is we really take what is the optimal level of whatever we're measuring. We want to measure it in the correct tissue category. And then we want to make sure that that level is balanced against the other factors in the system. And we really take into account how each system talks to each other, how they interplay, how they're complex. And then we put that in the context of the individual, their environment, their emotions, their stressors. Do they live in a city? Do they walk behind the city bus? Do they travel on an airplane? Do they live in the country? Right? We take everything into account. And I'm sure you're very used to hearing this too, but clients will say for the very first time, I feel like you get it. Like I feel like you heard me. I feel like we're getting somewhere. And that's
At least
that's
someone's
really
listening.
satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I similarly in my late 30s would have issues come up and I would think, well, I'm probably in perimenopause, right? And it couldn't have been further from the truth because I didn't understand that imbalances were starting to happen. My body was no longer able to buffer and detox what it needed to detox because little did I know, I wasn't able to support the actual physiologic processes in the body. Nobody was telling me this. I didn't understand. Even when I went through physician assistant studies and becoming board certified in conventional medicine, you're not taught the underlying pathophysiology and the nutritional requirements to make the systems run.
Mhm.
So imbalances happen in a very predictable way for men and women. Now, testing is obviously the best way to get a look at those imbalances. But when you don't have testing, symptoms and duration and environment can be a good proxy for that too. So everyone can find their point of entry just by knowing what's been going on in their life and the symptoms that they've been experiencing. So you are very familiar with the rain barrel effect and the idea that the body can buffer so much for so long, right? In my 20s, I mean, I could sleep very little. I could do a lot. I could
I
work
could do
out. I could stay up
everything.
all the,
Yeah.
life was good, right? Everything was good. It's because the system had enough of a buffer zone to be able to buffer against the lack of sleep, against the toxins, against maybe the processed food or the poor eating. And the older you get and the less you support those foundations, the more minimal that bandwidth becomes. So as soon as you're no longer able to buffer, then you start to get this spillover effect. And that spillover effect is a symptom: more tired, I don't recover as well. I don't tolerate alcohol. I have bloating. I have more PMS. I feel like I'm accumulating more water weight. I get headaches. And everyone thinks, well, it never used to happen that way. So why is it happening now? And it's because of that gradual accumulation, right? We can no longer buffer against the system. So as soon as we start to have symptoms, that's when we typically reach for our doctor. We typically reach for, well, what's going on here? And that's where functional and integrative health can really play a role because you're not at a disease state yet, right? And that's not what we do in integrative health either. We don't diagnose, we don't treat, we don't cure. We look at the underlying systems of the body, how they're imbalanced, how we can support the body to do what it does naturally and to get it back into a state of balance. So when clients come to me and they say, well, this is off. I'm not feeling like myself. I may have some more PMS symptoms. I may have lower libido, lower drive. I might be starting to get some hair growth in places that I don't want it. I might be starting to get acne or some skin changes. We want to look at, well, how did that begin in the first place? Because we're not going to band-aid it. That's not our approach. So if I peel back all of the layers, I start asking about stress. What have stress levels been like, whether that's acute or whether that's chronic? And what's really important to understand is that the body inside deals with stress the same way, whether that's stress of you running around after your kids, whether that's stress of you being in the car, or the stress of eating processed food, or the stress of having an imbalanced microbiome inside the body. It's the
It's
same
all
currency:
stress.
stress, stress. Yeah, stress, stress, stress. And so the body, in a very smart way,
Oh, can I add in one thing there? Because most people
yes, please.
so overlook this. Poor sleep. If you don't sleep well, that is a
Yes,
huge stressor, and most people think nothing of a bad night's sleep.
100%. And that is an excellent add in. Stress is what the body perceives a poor night's sleep as high stress. It will dysregulate your blood glucose levels. It will increase your cortisol levels. It will disrupt hormones. The number one thing, I would say the number one and two things that clients need to do in order to get well, because there's no pill, supplement, or regimen that will get you better, other than making sure that your foundations are met, including really good sleep. Now, that's 90 minutes of deep sleep and 120 minutes of REM sleep. Whether you're tracking it or not, if you're not a good sleeper, you need to start being a good sleeper. And there's many things to do for that. And the second is dealing with emotions and mindset. And those are the two things that, if those pieces are missing, we're never going to get back in balance. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, and most people, because I do a lot of consultations a week, and I heard you speak earlier because I like to listen to people before I speak to them. And you were saying like your consultations are going from 60, 90, 100 minutes. My consultations run from 60 to 90 minutes, and I'm going into, at some stages, I'm going into, do you remember what your mom was like when she was pregnant on you? Do you know, was there anger in the family, violence, anything? But
Yes.
I see anger, rage, past, I don't want to say trauma, but past experiences fester in the liver
Yes.
and the guts. And it's just like a kindling and it can just explode sometimes. And that's where I think the element of rage and perimenopause comes in. But like when you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, because I had a consultation last night and there was so much pain coming out of this woman. I had to stop myself from crying. I could feel the damage that was there.
Yeah, the body keeps the score, right? Literally an homage to the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Our body stores emotion, right? And you can get into the underlying idea of how fascia works and which organs are associated with which sort of emotional components. But sometimes that emotion is stored so deep in our subconscious that we don't actually access it. So somatic practices, practices that get you into the body so that you can experience the body, even meditation, binaural beats, however you can access that subconscious too and release whatever emotion is there is deeply healing. I'm glad you touched on that.
You know, if you don't mind, I want to also just add in a few things because I'm sure there's people who've never heard of the rain barrel effect. And what we're referring to
Mm,
is the concept of your cup is full and it's spilling over. And what I say to clients is your cup might have been a mug when you were in your 20s, but now as you get older, that cup shrinks into a teacup and you cannot hold as much as you used to. And another thing, and then we'll let you speak again, is a lot of women, you did touch on this, is they externally they think, well, nothing's changed. I still look the same. Everything's the same. They miss the boat, an Irish term, uh, when it comes to what's happening on the inside. Just because you look the same on the outside and you haven't changed anything does not mean it's all changed on the inside. And then one last thing, because every time I post this on Instagram stories, I get so many responses. And I just say, just because your mind does not think you're stressed does not mean your body is not stressed. Because a lot of time women will say, no, I'm not stressed. It's okay. I'm like, you're definitely stressed. Like just because you don't feel it right now, that stress is still there.
100%. I could not agree with you more. And I think it's really important to understand the way that inflammation works in the body, right?
Mhm.
You can't see inflammation. It's there and it drives and imbalances so many of the physiologic processes that are happening in the body. And inflammation really didn't come on the scene um, until that big nasty epidemic with the big C word.
Mhm.
And we started to learn about what inflammation was. It became a more public term. But you're right. You don't see inflammation, and all of these processes create inflammation in the body. And that's what we don't want. That inflammation drives chronic disease. And we want to reduce levels of inflammation as much as possible to restore balance to the body. And I think you're right in saying that so many people are disconnected from how the body feels stressed because they never stop.
Yes.
And sometimes stopping can also elucidate a trauma response when stopping also feels unsafe. It feels better to be busy. It feels more in control to be busy, to be constantly running, to have a to do list, because once you stop, not quite sure what to do. And that doesn't feel good. And so there's a lot of disconnection. We have to reconnect ourselves with our body, with ourselves internally, and understand what those subtle signs of stress are, right? Waking up at 2 or 3 in the middle of the night, waking up, not having breakfast, not feeling hungry for hours and hours, right? Wanting to stay up at night. There's no such thing as a night owl. That's just a
I say
dysregulated
this all
cortisol.
the time. There's no such thing. Or the same with I'm just one of these people who's not hungry in the morning. I'm like, that's BS. That's dysregulated hormonal system.
Yep,
Or,
yep. It's
I'm sorry,
Go
just to
ahead.
add on to your list is why am I randomly crying? Why am I getting upset in public?
Why is that emotion so right beneath the surface? How can I touch that so easily? Because it wants to be seen, right? It wants to be let out. And those are all cues that you're listening to the body. One other important thing to talk about how we begin to imbalance the system are the toxins that we're exposed to.
Mm.
Toxins, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, many of which are xenoestrogens. So xenoestrogens, if you've never heard that word, Chemaine, I know you have, and you know you're an expert in this. But xenoestrogens can mimic estrogen in the body and cause significant amount of imbalances. These are chemicals in the environment that are in face cream, that can be in your toothpaste, that can be in your lip balm, that can be in your lotions and your shampoos, that can be on the couch that you sit on that's been sprayed in flame retardant, that could be on the airplane that just got bombed with whatever detergent they're spraying the airplane with to clean it. And it can be in receipts, right? I tell people all the time, don't touch your receipts. You don't need it. Do you go home and put it in a scrapbook? No, throw it away. Don't touch it. But it's allowing those chemicals to get in the body. When those chemicals get into the body, it creates a state of estrogen dominance, whereby we start to, along with chronic stress, predictably decline in progesterone. And then we look like we're imbalanced with a higher estrogen. And that imbalance and the decrease of progesterone is going to start causing symptoms, because the body is not dumb. The body is so smart in what it's doing. And as soon as it starts to feel stress, it will protect the body at all costs. And that means producing cortisol. That's your get up and go. That's your drive. That's, I can take on the day. I can get through the day. I have enough gas in the tank to get me there. Your body will prioritize that. At the expense, it has to take away from progesterone. So it will start to lower progesterone, and that's your libido, right? That's helping you get deep sleep. That's starting to create estrogen dominance, where now you start to say, I don't feel like myself, but it's because of that imbalance. The body will also smartly tank that progesterone because it doesn't have the resources. It doesn't feel like it can sustain bringing life into the world. So very smartly, the body goes, we're going to make you feel like you don't want to have a baby anymore. So it tanks that progesterone, keeps your cortisol running. Even if you're able to press on the gas and there's no more gas in that gas tank, it will keep you going at all costs. The other costs eventually are either an upregulated testosterone, which causes that unwanted hair growth on the lip, the chin, or hair thinning, because that increased testosterone can convert to DHT and cause some hair thinning. Or it can tank that testosterone, and then you have a lack of drive. You have lower libido. You feel more apathetic. You feel not like yourself. You just don't have the same spark you used to. You don't have the same energy you used to. So when we start to get those imbalances, and now estrogen is higher, we also have a situation where we might start to accumulate more fat, right? There's more toxins to deal with. And what happens to the body when toxins come in is that we have multiple ways to deal with toxins, but the main way we deal with toxins is the liver. It has to come in through the liver, and it comes in a fat soluble form. So if we don't have a way to process it, guess where the body's going to store it?
My hips.
In fat. In fat, right?
Yeah.
Great storage. We protect the body from the toxin. We put it in a nice, safe deposit box, and you get to keep it. What we really want to do is have the liver detoxification pathways working really great. And in order to do that, we need phase 1 and phase 2 nutrients to be supported. A lot of those, specifically phase 2 nutrients, are those sulfur-based amino acids that most people aren't getting in their diet. And if they're not taking a multivitamin that has those in it, then they're missing out. And they may need to actually take a detox specific supplement to get those sulfur-based amino acids. Because what happens when estrogen, there's too much, or it's dominant in terms of progesterone, is that it will start to metabolize that estradiol into different forms, either the 2-hydroxy, the 6-hydroxy, the 16-hydroxy. And that pathway can either be protective and lower inflammation, or what the body actually prefers is the higher inflammation pathway, because it's the path of least resistance. It takes the least amount of energy. So what we end up with is more of these inflammatory estrogen metabolites, and we further create inflammation in the body. We further accumulate fat. So what we need to do is really make sure that we're optimizing phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. And most people will say, well, I don't need to worry about detoxification. My liver detoxifies everything. It does what it needs to do. And it does, but on a continuum, right? It can either be really clunky and slow, and it can be the car that needs a new transmission, or it can be a brand new car. And we need to make sure that we're optimizing towards being efficient as possible, because that allows the body to rebalance so many of these hormone levels as easily as possible. All right. We don't want to make it harder for the body to eliminate toxins, because if we make it hard for the body to eliminate toxins, we're just going to keep them. We'll keep them on our hips. We'll keep them on our lower abdomen. And that will be the stubborn fat that we feel like doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And what's even worse than that is when the body starts to accumulate visceral fat, or fat that's not on the outside of the stomach muscles, but that's on the inside and that surrounds the organs, and can in some cases be deposited actually in the liver and impact phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification.
And it's so
Right?
common, so common now,
So common, so
especially in women.
common.
It used to only be a man's thing for drinking too much beer, as we were taught, but it's everywhere in women now. It's insane.
Yes, and it has nothing to do with alcohol. Nothing to do with alcohol.
Yeah.
There are some forms that do, but in this case, it does not. And what we find is the amount of inflammation that occurs impacts morbidity, mortality, and your longevity, your ability to feel your best for as long as possible. What's even more fascinating is that as adipose or fat tissue accumulates, it acts as its own endocrine organ, right? It
But
has its
most
own
women, I'm sorry,
yeah.
because I had this conversation with a woman last night. Most women believe that fat cells are just a storage site for fat or calories. And
Mm,
I will be as bold as to say this whole plus size model movement and embrace the larger body, I think it's done a lot of damage. And this is my opinion.
mm.
Um, I think it's done a lot of damage because it's said you can still be 300 or 400 pounds and be healthy without considering the caveats. Like fat is not just fat, as you're about to tell us.
It is a very metabolically active organ. You almost have to consider that it's its own organ, it's its own system, because a lot of our satiety cues and hormones are actually produced from this fat. Now, leptin is one of those satiety cues that's actually produced from fat cells. Leaner individuals actually have a higher level of leptin, and they're very sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
So they eat, they feel full, they stop. Right. And there's other cues that go into this. This is a very complex system. But if we're just talking about the fat tissue itself, in individuals who have a larger amount of this adipose tissue, leptin is increased, right? We want to signal to the body, we're good, we got enough resources, we've got enough to sustain us. But then what happens is, because those levels are high over a prolonged period of time, and stress can increase those levels, then the body becomes resistant to it. It's like the boy who cried wolf. Well, you keep saying you're full, you're full, you're full, but you keep eating. We don't really know what to do here. So it becomes resistant. It doesn't sense the cue and it doesn't respond appropriately. So what we have is more adipose tissue and no cue to stop eating, to be satiated. And so we eat more. Add into that chronic stress, which is toxins, lack of sleep, lack of nutrients, inflammation in the body. Now we're continuing to increase cortisol, dysregulate blood sugar levels, right? So we have increased inflammation in the body, and then we continue to add more adipose tissue. So it's this cycle that we need to break with diet, exercise, lowering inflammation levels, getting the good sleep that we need, making sure that we're not exposed to chemicals in the environment, in our cosmetic products, and really reset that sensitivity so that we're no longer resistant to it.
I spoke to a woman last night, and I think this will be interesting for the audience. I spoke to a woman who she was having very heavy periods. So this was going on, and the only alternative apparently was an IUD. So I can understand the situation. You're hemorrhaging out in public. Yes, I can. IUD, if it helps, of course. Nobody had addressed the issue of the estrogen dominance aspect of things. So she also had some liver damage. She was on a low protein diet, which was explaining to her that in order for the liver to metabolize and detoxify estrogen properly, it needs to have adequate protein. And she was just in this vicious circle and she wanted my help. And I like, look, we have to break this cycle and we need to start with trying to offload as much of the fat as we can. So that in itself will reduce your estrogen load. We got to focus on reducing inflammation, and then I'll bring in the nutrition aspect. But like you said, she was just stuck in this cycle and nobody had told her, like, you need to break this or you're it's going to just get worse.
Yeah, and that's another good connecting piece. Fat cells actually produce and store estrogen, so it can add fuel to the fire. If you're already stressed, you have low progesterone, you're estrogen dominant, maybe you're exposed to chemicals in your uh, personal care products, and now you're accumulating adipose tissue that is then creating and storing more estrogen, leading to some of these things like worse PMS, more heavy bleeding. Um, and that's a balance that we can support. We can rebalance that system because we understand the pathophysiology of what's going on underneath. Additionally, those fat cells have aromatase, an enzyme that will convert testosterone to more estrogen, making the situation even worse. So breaking the cycle is really important. And, how can we expect our clients to understand? I mean, I would say even the general population, how would you expect anyone to understand how complex the system is?
Mhm.
It's never taught. Your doctor never talks about it. You never learn about it in school. And it takes finding their way to somebody like you who understands the underlying issues and the different layers that we have to peel back and support in order to break that cycle. Because what we've learned, back in 50s, 60s, 70s diet culture, calories in and calories out isn't dieting. That's not the be all end all, because we know that if you eliminate limited calorie intake, the output would be weight loss, and that does not happen. So we know that there's other factors that play. We know it's a more complex system, and we really need to understand that, and that each situation is a little unique too, right? Someone's facial hair growth and hair loss on their head might be another woman's heavy bleeding, PMS, water weight gain.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because women also have the mindset of, well, my sister doesn't have this, so why? And both my sister and I have estrogen dominance, but we present very differently. I
Yes.
have no cycle issues at all. And because of what I do, I don't really have any symptoms unless I start messing around with my hormones too much, which I've done. But she has estrogen dominance. She has the endometriosis. She has the very heavy bleeds. Like, so every woman presents differently. And there is so much to be considered. People ask me for meal plans all the time. I'm like, okay, I can make up a meal plan or you could Google it, but it doesn't mean anything. You can follow it,
No.
but it doesn't mean it's going to fix anything. It's not designed for you specifically. And there's so much to be considered that I smiled, like I laughed when you said, oh, and we've got aromatase. And I was like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. Because it can be, because then you have
Yeah.
heavy metals stored in fat cells. Heavy metals can attach to hormone receptors and block our hormones. We also have
Mm-hmm.
pesticides and herbicides get stored in fat cells. I posted a study recently that showed when you start breaking down fat, if you dump the pesticides into the bloodstream, it can slow metabolism by 400%. Like stuff like this is enough to say, I quit. Like this is just too much.
And I think it's also important to normalize the healing journey isn't always a step forward. Sometimes it's two steps forward and one step back, because everyone is so bio individual. And we all have these chemical pathways. Your body has a preference for one or the other based on environment and genetics. The whole system of epigenetics, how different things manifest when the genetics are added to your unique situation, your unique environment. So it's not always straightforward. It's not as straightforward as a meal plan. It's not as straightforward as, put this in the system and this will come out, because we're really dealing with layers, and we have to ensure that those foundations are met. So for me, those foundations are always an activated multivitamin. It has to have the functional medicine forms. It has to have methylated forms of those vitamins. And sometimes that needs to be individualized based on whether there's MTHFR mutations. And some of that, there is a small sector of the population that needs that more individualized. But in general, foundations are a good multivitamin. I also say a greens powder. You need some way to get antioxidants into the system. And I know that most people are not eating 9 to 11 servings of fruit and vegetables per day. It's
I'd
just
be
hard
lying
in
if
our
I
daily
said
life.
I was.
So we need some way to get those into the system because we know they have such a great benefit. You just want to make sure that you're finding one for potency and purity, and that has a good blend. It's not just spirulina, it's not just chlorella. You want a really great blend. Um, and then vitamin D. Now, I can say this based on hundreds and hundreds of lab tests that we run that most people are not at optimal levels of vitamin D unless they are supplementing, no matter where they are in the world, even if you live in Florida or you live in South America, if your body's not exposed to that sunlight for a majority of the time, the majority of the days, and depending on your individual conversion rate,
Mhm.
I would test and make sure that you're adequate in vitamin D because that's so important for our hormone balance as well.
Yeah.
In addition to vitamin D, I would argue that zinc year round, as well as vitamin C, the body does not produce vitamin C. Most of us are not getting as much as we should in terms of an antioxidant. Those two, I would add on to a foundational protocol all year round. Zinc, especially, is just a cofactor. So for so many of the processes in the body, and it gets used up like that if the body's under stress. And the final one I would throw in there would be magnesium. And Chemaine, I'm sure you see a lot of clients who need magnesium.
It's, I was going to say, especially when there's a lot of stress, but that would just be everybody. So, yeah, everybody. People don't understand, and I can't expect them to, burn rate in regards to how fast we're burning through these minerals like zinc and magnesium when you have a lot of stress. And that could be just a busy day running kids around, or it could be a hard workout. Your burn rate increases the more demand you're putting on your body. So, what you call a foundational supplement stack, I call in my client circle, it's called our basic supplement stack. And it's like,
Yes.
these are the basic supplements that are going to cover most of your needs, while at the same time I'm considering finances and stuff like that. But like these,
Yes.
and one thing that's always been there was vitamin C for supporting the adrenals, progesterone, free radical scavenging, obviously some immune health, but that's always been a staple.
Yeah. And I think that's brilliant. And if everyone um, just the basic bundle, and then they worked on mindset and tapped into that parasympathetic nervous system and had moments of really deep rest, we could do so much to balance the system that didn't even need specialty supplements or protocols. I really believe that. And we have to take into consideration when we're stressed, we actually lower stomach acid. We lower our ability to absorb the things that we take in. So we need to optimize the system to use what we give it. We need to make sure that we're taking in optimized forms of what the body needs, but there's layers upon layers of that too, especially if you're noticing burping, bloating,
Acid
or
reflux is
acid
huge.
reflux, or after you have a meal that you have to chew. I always tell my clients if you feel like you need to take a nap or go to sleep or have a rest, that means that there's some weaker stomach acid there, that there needs to be some rebalancing. And that's another symptom of chronic stress, right? If your body doesn't feel stressed, but you're a snacker because you can't sit down to enjoy a meal because it'll put you out for 2 hours, that's a sign that the body's highly stressed.
Even I would argue snacking in itself is very stressful because you're not giving the migrating motor complex time to work in the
Yes.
gut either. But we've been very conditioned to have snacks. And
Yes.
in my industry, because I started as a personal trainer in the gym world, you're very
Mm-hmm.
much encouraged to eat 5 or 6 meals a day, and absolutely not something I agree with, because as an integrative health practitioner, I'm not just considering we want to build muscle, I'm considering all the other variables. And of course, a lot of personal trainers don't know these different caveats, but definitely not something I'm recommending.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the old adage was keep your metabolism high, right? Keep it revved up all day long. But that stress on the body, that's another perceived stressor internally because that digestive system never does get that rest. Um, and we need to make sure that we're able to give that a rest and a reset, and being able to get adequate nutrition at all of our meals, to digest it appropriately at all of the meals, and to get in enough protein uh, is hugely beneficial. Chemaine, how much protein are you typically recommending for your clients?
Um, Generally, no less, this is going to sound crazy, but no less than 120 grams a day per person. Now, it'll vary from person to person. I'm typically personally at 150, but I would consider myself an athlete. Like I train hard and a lot, and I have forever. But I'm trying to get them to 120. If I see 100, and if they started with me and they were at 40 or 50 and now they're at 100, I'm quite happy with that. But I try to manipulate it as best I can. And I really think if you're eating enough at each breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you're eating it in the right context combinations, you will keep the metabolism high. So,
Yeah. And the goal is to not artificially depress that metabolism through fasting or through low carb diets either, right? We need to make sure that the system has enough protein, enough of our macros. And if digestion is an issue while we're working on that lower stomach acid, I'm typically recommending those digestive enzymes, so that it can help degrade your food for you, that you're not using all of that energy to break down that protein. Otherwise, you'll just avoid it, right? You'll find ways around it. And I typically find that most women are not tracking their protein, right? In our mind, subjectively, we can say, yeah, I get enough. I think I get enough. But when you put pen to paper and you're actually looking at, and I'm not an advocate of anyone, needing to write down all the foods that they eat or tracking down the calories. I don't think that tracking is beneficial long term. And most people can't sustain it. It's just another,
well, it
uh,
adds an extra stress to a lot of
it
women,
does.
but it also then makes them feel guilty if they can't keep it up. They feel like a failure. Now, I have some clients absolutely love tracking. They'll track everything. They love it. That's few and far between, but the majority of women, it is an extra stress. I was telling you, I have a bigger group, and we spend at a minimum of 1 week during the group cycle learning how to track and learning about macros.
Mm,
And I just want you to do it for a week so you can see visually, because you can't trick the numbers, where you're at with each macro. And then that gives you an idea of what you're having. And if it's for you, keep it up. But if it's not, you don't have to keep it up. But I at least like people to see visually, because it's almost my way of proving to them like you're under eating this or you're overeating this. So that's what we'll do.
yeah. Get a baseline, understand where you're at. That's the same reason I recommend a continuous glucose monitor, even if you're not going to continue doing it for months and months, totally fine. Just get one, wear it for 2 weeks. Understand your body. Your body's going to be individual. I
Mhm.
know that I can have a banana and it won't break my levels won't change. But if I have tortilla chips, watch out because they'll be elevated for 2 hours unless I go for a walk, right? There's very individual issues that happen with your body, and understanding those fluctuations are very important for making sure that you're not accumulating that toxic fat, that you are rebalancing those hormones, and that the system has as little inflammation as possible. And I think you also touched on a really important point: women and shame around healing. We have to make sure that there's no victimization in what's happening to your body. It's not your fault. You weren't taught how to do things. You weren't taught how the system operates, nor do you need to have the level of understanding in order just to have a healthy body. You can lean on people like Chemaine, who understands the layers and the pathophysiology and can be that support, but in no way, shape, or form should anything be shameful, right? This is your journey. Everyone comes to this place. Everyone is on the point in their journey, but they are all completely whole. There's nothing wrong with any single person on this journey. It's just our journey in this life to do the best that we can and to seek out information to the best of our ability. And there should be no shame around it. Shame is going to be another stressor. Um,
Well,
we just need to let go of.
shame is enough to make people throw in the towel and quit.
Yeah.
Whereas understanding, okay, today might have been a bad day, or I might have had a meal off plan because I wasn't prepared. I have learned my lesson, and we restart again from that point. So everything should be a lesson, but I also understand that's easier said than done as well.
Yeah, 100%. I believe in 80-20. Get 80% of it right. And 20% of the time, you're going to be human. We are all going to be human. And that's when I really fall back on or rely on the functional medicine detox that Dr. Cabral has to do that reset for 7 days every quarter, just to make sure that there's that period of time where I can eat in a way that I'm also mindful of my eating, that I'm also giving my body that time to reset, get into those deeper levels of autophagy, help to clear some of that toxic fat, that accumulation, um, and sort of reset the system. And I know then after that detox, should symptoms arise, I know there's something that I wasn't looking at before. And I know that if I go back to my regular way of eating and digestion is an issue, well, I had eliminated something that was an issue that I wasn't looking at clearly during that 7 day period.
Or the Herxheimer reaction is very common. It's so, as you know, when you speak to someone on a consultation, they're almost under pressure that they're not telling you everything, and then you start working with them. And I recently had a woman, and she broke out in a big rash across her eyes, and I was like, "Oh, your body was a lot more toxic than we realized it was, just based on the consultation," which also goes to show that just because you do a consultation, we have no idea how your body's going to respond until we get into it.
Yeah, and that's where you need that individual support, because sometimes you need to slow it down. Sometimes you need to modify it in a way. Sometimes it needs to be more gentle for a longer period of time. And you're right, everyone is so individual. You can't look at somebody and say, well, you're healthy, or you have toxins, or this is your toxic load, this is your level of inflammation. And you can't know that just by looking at someone.
And then, of course, every woman, especially, wants to rush ahead. We want the immediate results. I want it now. And that in itself can be a challenge. That Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm sorry.
And we didn't get here in a day. It took years to get to this to this place, to these symptoms, to how you're feeling. Now, it's not going to take years to get to a place of
Oh,
feeling
no.
better, but it does take some time. And I typically say about 6-ish months or so, you'll start to see some improvement in the first 2 to 3 weeks, especially with just some foundational support and a detox if you've
Mhm.
never done a detox, especially if they're doing that 21-day detox. So by the end of that 21-day detox, they're feeling more balanced sleep. They're feeling more restful sleep. Their energy levels are more balanced. They're starting to feel good again. And what most people tell me is, I didn't know I could feel that good. I didn't know I actually felt so bad before I did this.
Yeah.
And
You're
it's an
saying
eye
what I
opener.
say all the time. I'm sorry to
When
cut
you
you off, but most people do not know what it feels like to feel good. They think they feel good, but it's until they clean up their act, as I say, they've they're like, "Oh my God, I thought I felt normal. I thought I felt good." And I'm like, "There you go. The proof's in the pudding."
and what a beautiful gift to give somebody who thinks that they're naturally aging, or that they're approaching perimenopause, and I say those in air quotations, or that they think that this is what they're left with. This is what I get to live with. I'm just getting older. And it's not. We know so much about the body. We know so much about supporting the body. We know so much about longevity these days that we can really make sure that you are living vivaciously and energetically and strong into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We have clients in their 90s that are doing wonderfully. I mean, it's just such a gift to find when you didn't feel good before. Not
You
that.
have to, there has to be an understanding as well. We cannot work miracles. You have to be ready to do the work, and you have to fully
Yep.
commit. If you do want to live that vibrant, optimized life into your 70s, 80s, and 90s, you have to show up nearly every day and put in the work. And that in itself is a scary concept. Which brings me to something. I'd love your opinion on this, because you mentioned the 21-day detox. And like yourself, I've been doing this for a long time, work with a lot of people. And what I've noticed is 21 days, most people will not stick to it. As much as I hate to say it, they won't. Then I have the 7 day liver detox, and that more people will commit to it, but even at that, it's a stretch. By day 5 and 6, they're like, I'm ready for a refeed or something. And what I've noticed even more, and considering I'm in a different environment here in Calgary, lifestyle is it's crazy busy here, like very different from Ireland and Europe. Some people I've noticed struggle to stay even 3 days on a plan. Um, I'd love your opinion on that. Like, why do you think people are struggling so much now to stay on whatever the plan is?
I think it's a couple things, but the number one thing that you can do to be successful at a 7 day or a 21-day detox is set yourself up for success. You want to know what you're going to eat on day 5 and 6 before you start the program. You want to know that you have those items in the house, because when you're hungry and when you want to eat, that's when you're going to make bad choices if it's not already there for you. And the meals do not have to be complicated. I say simpler, the better. A piece of fish, large serving of broccoli, having a carb with that as well, making sure it's just there. It's already ready for you to eat so that you can continue eating that way. Now, the detox, for those people who don't know, days 1 and 2 are a fasting mimicking days. You're actually not getting into ketosis because you're having 4 shakes per day. So you're getting really good nutrition and protein throughout the day, but you're not dipping into ketones. So after days 1 and 2, then days 3 through 7 are a shake in the morning. You're having a vegetarian style lunch, another shake in the afternoon, and then a paleo style dinner. So you're having a piece of fish or approved meat on there. We're eliminating red meat because it's more inflammatory, harder to process. But you're able to actually eat a fair amount of food. So in terms of detoxes, this is meant to be very gentle, but we know that gentle for a lot of people does, allow a lot of purging. So for people that have a hard time completing this, well, that's a cue that we need to be mindful about what we're doing in everyday life that doesn't mimic this eating style. Because if we're not able to eat a vegetarian style lunch, have a shake after that, and have a full dinner, what are we doing that's not that? And how do we get back towards that? And I would recommend mimicking that sort of eating style, even when you're not on the detox. So with the detox, you're taking detox specific nutrient supplements, but you can eat in the same way, not on a detox and not having to take those additional capsules. You can have a smoothie for breakfast. You can have a wonderful plant-based lunch. You can have a mid-afternoon snack. You can even have a second shake should you want to, and then having a large dinner. But that amount of food should provide a fair amount of satiety. So then I turn towards what's the emotional state around eating? What does it feel like when something feels a little bit restrictive? And that's typically where we need to work. There's a little bit of a mindset piece. There's a little bit of a trigger there. There's some layer underneath there that isn't just the food or the detox or the meal plan. There's something more that we have to explore, in addition to having that person set themselves up with get all of the drinks that you're going to drink, make all the teas, right? Have everything prepped and ready to go. So there's no excuses, but there's typically another layer that we need to talk about and address.
Oh, for sure. Especially since the COVID debacle, the unhappiness and stress would be the primary things I'm looking at on why can you not commit for more than 3 days? Like something else is happening there. So we're coming up on time. I did want to discuss the equal life at home tests, which are available for Canadians, and I believe I do have an affiliate with them. But can you just, there's some awesome ones. Like the thyroid, very appealing to me. I love testing thyroid. And then you have hormone tests that we can do. Can we speak really quick on a few of those?
Yeah, absolutely. My number one recommendation, if you want to dip your toes in, you're resonating with some of this information. You're saying, "Yeah, I don't feel like myself, or something's off. I've been meaning to look into this, right? I've been meaning to go down this road." My number one recommendation would be Equal Life's stress, mood, and metabolism test. It looks at your hormones, but it looks at the hormones in saliva. So whole blood, if you were to do whole blood, it looks at the bound, the inactive, and the active part together. So you don't exactly know how much is active. I love looking at saliva because you're looking at the active form, that active metabolite of the hormone. Then you're also getting 4 cortisol measurements throughout the day. We're seeing what energy levels look like in the morning. And then are you appropriately coming down? Do you have a nice diurnal rhythm? Is that setting you up for a good night's sleep? Or is it not? Does the system need some support there? And then it's also looking at full thyroid, which is your T4, your free T4, your free T3, your TSH, your TPO antibodies. It's also looking at vitamin D, and it also looks at insulin, hemoglobin A1C. So it gives you a really well-rounded picture of where is stress, where is inflammation coming from, where are we imbalanced, and how can we support the system.
Mm-hmm.
Next, after that, if you do experience bloating, stomach upset, burping, you just don't feel like you digest your food very well, I feel like something might be off digestively, then definitely running the vitamin tox test kit looks at the gut microbiome, your detox factors, your vitamins, your vitamin levels, but then it also includes a hair test where we're looking at those toxic heavy metals. So stress, mood, metabolism would be my first recommendation. And then the vitamin tox test kit would be second. And those will give you a really well-rounded picture. It'll give you a good plan for the next year of your life if you want to plan for the next year of your life. But it will really give you an in-depth look at multiple different systems in the body and how to support them
Mm-hmm.
together.
Yeah, and they are, even though you guys are located in the States, they are available up in Canada
Yes.
for my
Yep.
listeners. Well, we've covered quite a lot of ground here. We're just about done, but I want to ask you, for a woman in her late 30s who will be transitioning into perimenopause eventually, do you have advice for your future self plus women who are going through perimenopause now?
Yes. If you don't have a practice that taps into the parasympathetic nervous system, that is your calming, safe side of your nervous system, if you don't have a practice, if you haven't cultivated time, if you haven't carved out time for yourself to slow down and to feel safe slowing down, the body will never rebalance. I can give you all the good supplements, I can give you all the good protocols, but your body will never feel safe enough to allow that rebalancing to happen. My favorite meditation, if you find that you cannot meditate, it's very hard for your busy, active mind. Go for a walk while listening to binaural beats. If that's difficult for you, find a breathwork practice where you're doing holotropic breathing to get the brainwave states into theta and alpha, very deep relaxation. Or find a sound bath near you. Find something that resonates with you to calm down the system, to allow it to feel safe, to rebalance.
Mhm.
My next recommendation is cruciferous vegetables, your number one friend. Our vegetables typically do not have enough of the substances in it that I love in order to help detoxify that estrogen, the indole 3 carbinol, the diindole methane. Estrogen balance is a product from Equalife that I feel that almost every single woman should be on. It will not cause you to produce lower amounts of estrogen. It actually helps with the metabolism of that estrogen down the more favorable pathways. And then, Chemaine, your basic bundle is just another high recommendation. If you're not on a foundational supplement protocol right now, get on one. It's the best thing that you can do. And it's a limited amount of supplements that will do wonders for your body.
Mhm. And I will add everybody, because people can get very attracted by the flashy lights all the time. You have to get your sleep and your nutrition down pat, as we say. You have to get that in place before you start clutching at other straws. You have to have the foundations.
Yeah, 100. Oh, we could do a whole show on sleep, couldn't we?
Oh,
How to do it, what you need.
it literally is my mantra. It's going to be on my tombstone. Sleep is number one. Before,
It
even
is
before nutrition, sleep. Because for my
sleep.
clients who don't sleep, everything else is harder. It's just so much
Yeah,
harder.
it
Well,
is.
Erica, this has been a pleasure, and you are just a gem at explaining everything and going into detail with such ease. I think my listeners and followers are going to take so much away from this. So, where can we find out more about Equal Life and even what yourself and Dr. Cabral has his own Instagram page, which is great as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Equal Life's website is equi.life. Chemaine, I'm sure that you'll drop your link in there so everyone can find out about the different products at Equal Life. Should you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I am on Instagram at Deeply Well Women or at Equal Life, Erica Hall at equa.life. So very, very happy to be here, Chemaine. I love the work that you're doing and just how brilliant you are in
Well,
bringing
thank
these
you.
concepts to life. So
I love
thank you.
what you guys are doing. Hence why I wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for making time for me, and we will chat soon. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.